Now I would like to tell you about Saint Germain, the hierarch of the age of Aquarius, because he is our great friend and teacher. What I'm about to tell you is said in greater detail in this book, Lords of the Seven Rays, which talks about the masters who teach us to walk a path of personal Christhood on each of the seven rays. Remember, I told you that you and your twin flame made a decision in the great central sun as to what would be your calling and service. Today, you are serving on a particular ray, one of the seven. You may not know what that ray is, but if you read about the lives of the masters, you will discover what kind of people serve on those rays, and then you may identify yourself as being on one and understanding a very specific way and method of externalizing the Christ on that ray. For instance, El Moria on the first ray is the example for statesmen, people in government, in the economy, in law, in business, leaders in every field. The first ray is the ray of leadership, administration, management. Lord Lanto, serving on the second ray, is the sage. All those who are teachers, communicators, those who study and embody the wisdom of God in any field are serving to externalize their Christhood on that ray. Paul the Venetian is the third ray, the pink flame of divine love. He is the artist. Through art and culture, drama, theater, through many other ways, we expand love in our hearts. It is a very creative area. People are creative in all fields. You may not specifically be an artist, but you have creativity, and that is the way you express your Christhood. Serapis Bey on the fourth ray is the architect. That is the white ray. Those who love excellence and desire to perfect themselves in any area. Those who delight in bringing into form the perfection of the geometry of God. The white light is the light of the Divine Mother, and those who have devotion to the Divine Mother in any field serve on this ray. Hilarion is the healer. He was embodied as the Apostle Paul. If you think of Paul's mission of healing, Hilarion had a similar mission. This is the fifth ray, the green ray, and this is not only a ray of healing, of physicians, of healers, of nurses, doctors, and those who pursue alternative methods. It's also the ray, again corresponding to a chakra, this is the third eye, of music, science, harmony, vision. Wherever you are expanding those areas, you find yourself serving on that ray. Lady Master Nada is known as the judge. She was an outstanding attorney on Atlantis. In another lifetime, she had a healing temple, the defender of the poor and the oppressed. This is Jesus' ray, the sixth ray. It is purple and gold. And those who love to minister to life and serve life find themselves on this ray. It could be in any profession and calling, but you love to help people, and you're finding a way, perhaps in human services, to do just that. You could be a psychologist, you could be anyone from a waiter to someone at the top levels of industry. Then you have Saint Germain, who is the alchemist on the seventh ray, and he is the one who embodies freedom, divine justice, mercy, and the seventh ray is also a ray of science, the priesthood of Melchizedek, and so forth. Now, all of us have some development of each of those rays, so if you heard of yourself on all seven rays and wondering where you belong, that is precisely the point. You do have development and achievement on all the rays, and what you will discover is the ray that really leads and is ahead, where you have the most development and the most ability. And you will find that your desire to serve God is best achieved by developing the skills, the disciplines, and the inner light and quality of that particular ray. It's like having a major in college. You also have a minor, and the minor might be the next ray on which you have the greatest excellence. So rather than telling you a little bit about each of these lords, I decided this evening to tell you a lot about one. And so the one I chose to speak to you about is our beloved Saint Germain, so that we can appreciate his position in America and in the planet today and just how crucial the hour is. Now, the first embodiment we take up about Saint Germain, which is illustrated in the Lords, there's lots and lots of illustrations in that book. We go back more than 50,000 years. Yes, you were alive and well on planet Earth 50,000 years ago, believe it or not. And it's kind of high time you got used to the idea that you are a continuum. You are a soul that has lived many, many times, and that's probably why sometimes it seems as though there's nothing new happening on planet Earth. You've done it all before, and you want to know when something new and exciting is going to happen. Well, I think a lot of people in the New Age feel that way because, you know, it kind of gets a little bit boring repeating the same thing over and over again for 50,000 years and more. So we want to get on with our higher consciousness. We need the light, we need the self-mastery, we need more tools to do other things. Otherwise, we are going to be repeating ourselves again and again. So Saint Germain was the ruler of a Golden Age civilization that existed in the fertile country where the Sahara Desert now is. You may have been embodied in that civilization. The majority of the people who lived under his rule retained full conscious use of the wisdom and power of God. They knew their I Am presence. The empire was filled with great peace, happiness, and prosperity. Saint Germain was a king-emperor and a master of the ancient wisdom. He ruled by light, his people loved him. The empire was a living example of perfection, and he embodied the archetype of universal Christhood for that dispensation. As time went on, even perfection itself became boring. People became interested in temporary pleasures, in themselves and their senses, more so than in the larger creative plan of the great God Self. And so there began to set in a certain mist, a certain densification of consciousness. This is the beginning of karma. It is very subtle. We use the light of God more to our own selfish purposes than to his glory, to objectively serve all of life. It's not really something that seems harmful or sinful, but it's the beginning of being out of touch with the central flame on the altar of being. A banquet was called by Saint Germain in response to the instruction of a cosmic council. At this banquet, he was to announce his decision to withdraw from being the ruler of this civilization. The banquet was held in the capital, the city of the sun. It was held for 576 of his counselors and public servants. He was accompanied at the banquet by his son and daughter. Following this banquet, a crystal goblet filled with pure electronic essence appeared to the right of each of the guests. This elixir was to serve for them as a soul protection afforded them by the Master, so that never throughout all incarnations to the very present they would ever forget their I Am presence. Or if they did somehow lose contact with that presence, upon seeing that chart that I have shown you, they would be immediately quickened and awakened to that divine light. A cosmic master spoke out of the great silence, and his address was broadcast to the nation. He brought a warning of a crisis to come and announced the withdrawal of the king and his children. He rebuked the people for their ingratitude and for the neglect of their God source. He reminded them of the command to obey the law of the One, the law of love. He concluded with a prophecy of their karma. A visiting prince approaches your borders. He will enter this city seeking the daughter of your king. You will come under the rule of this prince, but the recognition of your mistake will be futile. This teaching is an example of how karma blinds us. I'm sure we've all heard ourselves say after the fact, how could I have been so blind? How could I have not seen the obvious? Because of karma, we make very obvious mistakes in life. You should never condemn yourself for those mistakes, because earth is a schoolroom, not a valley of condemnation. So we must learn by our mistakes, and we must be serious about not making them again. Karma does blind us. It makes us less sensitive to those inner soul faculties that we have. The king and his children withdrew 7 days later to the golden etheric city of light. The etheric octave is congruent with the physical. When you journey to the etheric plane, as you do at night while your body sleeps, the soul travels in her etheric garment. It's the highest of the 4 lower bodies you have. It is a complete garment of light. The etheric body is actually the pattern out of which the physical body is expressed. So you journey to this etheric octave of light, where to this day, in this part of the heaven world, there are temples of light, golden age civilizations that are carrying on, cities. Out of this octave, John the Beloved said, I, John, saw the holy city descending out of God from heaven. So this is the place to which Saint Germain, his son and daughter, withdrew. They quitted the physical octave and went to the next plane above. The next day, after their presences were withdrawn, the prince arrived and took over without opposition. Within 2,000 years, the land had become barren, and a great cataclysm followed. Saint Germain said in a dictation of 1983, "Thus, beloved hearts, we come to a similar moment to that of that final hour of the golden age when I presided where the Sahara now is. My family is much larger than it was then, for I include every one of you who love me as my very own family." Next, we find Saint Germain 13,000 years ago, a high priest of the violet flame, in a temple on Atlantis. This temple was built of magnificent marble ranging in hue from brilliant white, shot through with violet and purple veins, to deeper shades of the 7th ray spectrum. It was actually at the time when I was writing this book last year that Saint Germain showed me this temple so that I could write down the exact description of it. This doesn't happen to be that temple, but is simply an artist's conception of temples that might have existed on Atlantis. So this temple of the violet flame is very much described in detail in our book, and I know you'll be interested. Now, what he showed me is that he sustained by his invocation there a fountain in the physical octave of violet singing flame. This magnetized the people from near and far to be set free from every binding condition of body, mind, and soul. Those who officiated at the altar were schooled in the universal priesthood of the order of Melchizedek at Lord Zadkiel's retreat. Now, Zadkiel is the archangel of the 7th ray, as Archangel Michael is the archangel of the 1st ray. So Archangel Zadkiel's retreat with his twin flame, holy amethyst, is in the etheric octave over the Caribbean, almost centered over the island of Cuba. That temple was physical when Atlantis was there. I think some of you do know that at Bimini there have been discovered what are thought to be remains of temples of Atlantis. Now, at this retreat, you have many ascended masters serving. The retreats of the Brotherhood are very large. When you go to sleep at night, you can ask your angels to take you to that retreat. It is a violet flame retreat. At this retreat, the ascended master Melchizedek presides. Melchizedek, you remember, greeted Abraham. Abraham was returning from a battle that is known as the slaughter of the kings. Abraham was victorious. He went to rescue his nephew Lot, who had been captured by these kings. When he came back with the spoils, he tithed 1/10 of those spoils to Melchizedek, and Melchizedek offered him communion. He broke bread and served him wine. Melchizedek is the highest initiate who appears in the entire Old Testament. He is an amazing individual. Now, the mysterious book of Hebrews in the New Testament the authorship of which is unknown, states that of Jesus Christ our Lord, he is a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. There is no explanation for this. We don't know what the priesthood of Melchizedek is. We don't know how Jesus became a priest, because in his life as Jesus, there's no record of him being a priest. What we find then in the Akashic records, as they were shown to me, is that both Jesus and Saint Germain studied in the retreat of the Archangel Zadkiel when they were in embodiment on Atlantis. Both received their initiations and disciplines leading to becoming priests of that order. And I was given to see the scene where Lord Zadkiel placed upon Jesus that full robe of light of that priesthood and pronounced the words recorded in Hebrews, "Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." That was the sealing of the initiation. Saint Germain received it also. Now this is a seventh ray priesthood, and those who qualify must demonstrate the balance of science and religion. Science, the alpha; religion, the omega, the plus and the minus. So in the seventh age, religion and science are one. Religion provides the flame, science provides the bowl, the matter universe. So it's a wonderful calling that Saint Germain leads us to, and truly the seventh age of Aquarius is an age of science that must have a spiritual flame within it if we are to avoid destroying ourselves with our science. We go to the 11th century BC, and we find that Saint Germain is embodied as the prophet Samuel, the great religious leader who figured as prophet, priest, and last of the Hebrew judges of the 12 tribes. The judges of Israel did not simply arbitrate disputes. They were charismatic leaders who were thought to have direct access to God and who could rally the tribes of Israel against oppressors. Samuel, as a child, was trained by Eli, the high priest. You remember when he was a little boy, his mother Hannah had prayed for him. She made him a little coat, and Samuel would be awakened by a voice at night calling him, and he would run to see if his mother or someone had called him. And so he was told that the next time he heard the voice, he should say, "Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth." He should answer God. And so he did, and God called him as a child to be a prophet. The amazing thing is that as a child, he delivered his first prophecy to Eli. Now Eli, the high priest, is wearing the breastplate of the high priest. It has 12 gemstones on it, one for each of the 12 tribes. And that is where we begin our teaching on gemstones and crystals, which we have brought with us for you, charged by these lords of the seven rays for your use in the development of the chakras. So here is Eli receiving Samuel, and Samuel's first prophecy was delivered to Eli. It was against Eli, whose sons were corrupt priests. God said to Samuel, "I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile and restrained them not." Eli knew that this judgment was true and accepted Samuel as a prophet of God. When Samuel was old, the children of Israel demanded a king, like all the other nations, and their free will was answered according to their karma. Samuel showed them how a king would tyrannize them, usurp their freedoms which they took for granted, but they still demanded a king. Samuel was very burdened of heart, extremely burdened, because he felt rejected. And God spoke to him and said, "Samuel, they have not rejected you, they have rejected me." So God told Samuel to anoint Saul as a king. And therefore we see that in the wickedness of Saul, the people received their own karma and their own free will. When Saul rejected the word of God and he heard Samuel's judgments pronounced upon him, God sent Samuel to anoint David, the shepherd boy, as king in his stead. We move on and we find that Samuel appears again. Saint Germain is embodied as Saint Joseph with Jesus and Mary. The thread of prophecy runs through his lifetimes. Saint Germain fulfilled the word of the Lord to Isaiah. There shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Joseph was of the lineage of King David, the son of Jesse. What is interesting to note about Jesus and about David is that David, who wrote the most magnificent Psalms, whose soul and heart we are inclined to, was a previous incarnation of our beloved Jesus. If you see the relationship here then of Samuel to David, Samuel anoints David king, then he is father to Jesus. They are close in the roles of father and son over many lifetimes. What we see here also is that there is nothing separate about the Judeo-Christian dispensation. The separation of Christians and Jews in America is a great burden on our hearts. It comes through the misunderstanding both of our doctrine and also of many facts that are distorted. This oneness of our evolution as the reincarnated 12 tribes, both Christian and Jew, should give us a unity of purpose to defend the promised land that God has given us. Joseph then was obedient to the warning to the angel, and he took the child and the mother, went to Egypt, where they stayed for 3 years until the death of Herod. Saint Germain again appears as Saint Alban, the late 3rd or 4th century. He was the first British martyr, a pagan soldier who served in the Roman army. A Christian evangelist named Amphibolus came to Alban seeking refuge from Roman soldiers who sought his arrest. Alban harbored the priest. He was impressed by his piety and converted. When the governor discovered where the fugitive was hiding, he sent soldiers to arrest him. Alban changed clothes with the priest, and he was arrested instead. The evangelist escaped. When the magistrate recognized Alban, he was furious. Alban was treated more harshly than the priest would have been. He was scourged, tortured, and sentenced to death. Thousands gathered to follow Alban to his execution. Their progress was blocked by a narrow bridge. It would have taken all day to pass. Going down to the water's edge, Alban lifted his eyes towards heaven. As he prayed, the stream parted to allow the multitude to pass through. Alban's executioner was converted on the spot, and he begged to die in Alban's place. Both of them were beheaded the same day. Such is the reaction to the light on this planet that I was speaking to you about before. It is the light in St. Stephen that caused him to be stoned to death. When that light increases, you must always be aware you need the protection of Archangel Michael. Saint Germain in the 5th century was Merlin, the prophet, seer, magician, and counselor at King Arthur's court. He arranged for Arthur's birth, tutored the boy, led him through 12 battles, which were initiations under the 12 solar hierarchies, or the 12 signs of the zodiac. He had to defeat 12 fallen ones, 12 wicked kings, in order to be rightfully the King of England, once he had pulled that sword from the stone. In some traditions, Merlin is described as a godly sage who studied the stars, and whose prophecies were recorded by 70 secretaries. His prophecies were very popular. At the beginning of the Renaissance, they were considered throughout Christendom to have as much authority as Isaiah's. Widely accepted in Britain and France into the 17th century, they were counteracted by the Council of Trent in the 16th, and Merlin's prophecies were put on the index of condemned material. You've probably never heard of the prophecies of Merlin. He also prophesied his own death, including the fate of our times. He said to Arthur, "My death is to be shameful and ugly and ridiculous." By legend, it goes that he allowed himself to be seduced by a beautiful maiden named Vivian, who used the magic she had learned from Merlin himself to imprison him in a cave or a castle of air. So this legendary figure, Merlin, passes through the mists, and we see the soul of Saint Germain, always the alchemist, always the prophet, always the scientist, now appearing in 1220 to 1292 in Britain as Roger Bacon. He was philosopher, monk, educational reformer, experimental scientist, renowned for his exhaustive investigations into alchemy, optics, mathematics, and languages. He's been called the most gifted man of the 13th century, the forerunner of modern science, a prophet of modern technology. He predicted the hot air balloon, a flying machine, spectacles, the telescope, the microscope, the elevator, mechanically propelled ships and carriages, and wrote of them as though he had actually seen them, and he had. He read them in the Akashic records. He went to his past lifetimes on Atlantis, where all of these things were in use. He knew they had been before, and they would be again. He saw the past and the future. Roger Bacon decided to become a member of the order of Friars Minor of the Franciscans. He said, "I will conduct my experiments on the magnetic forces of the lodestone at the self-same shrine where my fellow scientist, St. Francis, performed his experiments on the magnetic forces of love." This decision was highly detrimental to his scientific pursuits. He was charged with heresies and novelties, for which he was put in solitary confinement for 14 years by his fellow Franciscans. Roger Bacon said to his students, after having gone through this, "I believe that humanity shall accept as an axiom for its conduct the principle for which I have laid down my life, the right to investigate. It is the credo of free men, this opportunity to try, this privilege to err, this courage to experiment anew. We scientists of the human spirit shall experiment, ever experiment. Through centuries of trial and error, through agonies of research, let us experiment with the laws and customs, with money systems and governments, until we chart the one true course, until we find the majesty of our proper orbit, as the planets have found theirs. And then at last we shall move all together in the harmony of our spheres, under the great impulse of a single creation, one unity, one system, one design." Such is the heart and voice of Saint Germain, coming through again, this one Roger Bacon. Saint Germain was embodied as Christopher Columbus, 1451 to 1506. He sought his discovery of the New World based on the prophecies of Isaiah. He wrote to the king and queen when he had found the New World, "Neither reason nor mathematics nor maps were of any use to me. Fully accomplished were the words of Isaiah." He was referring to Isaiah 11, which reads, "And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people which shall be left. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." Here is Saint Germain as the prophet Samuel in Israel, Joseph with Jesus. He comes again to discover the new world, where these 12 tribes are to reincarnate. Israel and Judah, the northern and southern kingdoms. Israel, 10 tribes, Judah, 2 tribes. The 10 tribes of Israel reincarnated throughout the nations of Europe and came down through the Christian dispensation. The 2 tribes of Judah, Judah and Benjamin, are the Jews of today. These were scattered throughout the world, have re-embodied in America. Christopher Columbus holding that dream in his heart, made his way here to dedicate this land to the age of Aquarius, to you and to me, finding that I am presence, that light, that restoration of Christhood, and even the recollection of 50,000 years ago in that Golden Age civilization. We are surely called from ancient times and many lifetimes to finally place upon the altar of humanity the light of our hearts and our Christhood for the saving of a world. Saint Germain goes before us. We love him profoundly. We have known him so long. He has always led us. He brings us to this place. Today, he is counting on us to keep the flame. His last embodiment was as Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626. He has been called the greatest mind that the West ever produced, philosopher, statesman, essayist, literary master, the father of inductive reasoning, the herald of the scientific revolution, all of these things being qualities of the seventh ray. Bacon knew that only applied science could free the masses from human misery and the drudgery of sheer survival, in order that they might seek a higher spirituality that they once knew. He organized the translation of the King James Version of the Bible so that the common people could read the scriptures for themselves. He had a concept that he called the Great Instauration, meaning the restoration after decay, lapse, or dilapidation. That great instauration is about to happen in the United States of America, and if it can happen to us, it can happen to the whole world. Isaiah said he would raise up an ensign. An ensign is a sign. What is raised up in America is our light, our Christhood, and that I am presence. When we can demonstrate this in the government and the economy, in religion and science, then we have a real gift to give to other nations, instead of just giving them the corruption of Hollywood, the corruption of bad music, bad films, drugs, and all the things that we have sent around the world to the destruction of children. The great instauration then can happen through the violet flame and through this alchemy. It was his formula to change the whole wide world. He launched the English Renaissance by tutoring a group of men who were responsible for almost all of the Elizabethan literature. Yet he could have been an even greater boon to England had he been allowed to fulfill his true destiny. In the 1890s, 2 separate ciphers were discovered, embedded in the type of the original Shakespearean folios, as well as the works of Bacon and other Elizabethan writers. They operate on a principle similar to Morse code. The original folios have a random pattern of Roman and italic letters. The letters spell out in biliteral cipher the secret thoughts of Francis Bacon. They reveal that Francis was the author of the Shakespearean plays and that he was the rightful heir to the English throne. Francis wrote that he was born to Queen Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley, who is known as Lord Leicester, several months after a secret wedding ceremony. He was raised the foster son of Sir Nicholas and Lady Anne Bacon. Here are slides of Nicholas. This is Nicholas Bacon, Anne Bacon. Then we have Francis at 18. Then we see Elizabeth the Queen, and then we see Dudley, her husband. Which parents do you think Francis Bacon resembles? It is obvious that he does not have the traits of Nicholas and Anne. Queen Elizabeth, fearing to lose her throne prematurely if she declared an heir, never recognized Francis, never even gave him a single public office, and barred him forever from the succession. This grieved Francis profoundly. His mother actually was very cruel to him. He writes about this in his cipher, And he says, had it not been for the appearance to him of a vision and an angel, he could have become totally embittered. At the calling of God, he set himself to literary efforts and put his faith in the new world. He wrote in cipher, "I trust all to the future and a land that is very far towards the sunset gate. I keep the future ever in my plan, looking for my reward, not to my times or countrymen, but to a people very far off, and an age not like our own, but a second golden age of learning." Francis Bacon, who became the ascended Master Saint Germain, looked to us and the new world. He looked to America as the place where his spirit, his love, and his genius could be recognized by all people and put into action. I feel the great love of his heart and the great calling of his heart. As Saint Germain called me at the age of 18. It was then that I first saw a picture of Saint Germain as I picked up a book out of my mother's library just before leaving home for college. I opened that book and I saw his face, and he sent through that presence an electric spark that traveled through me, quickened me, galvanized me, and showed me that I must pursue and find him, find his work in this time, and that was the reason that I was embodied. This love I have for Saint Germain is extremely profound. It's very difficult to explain, but my whole life is moved by this blessed one who has done so much for all of us and for America. I'd like to tell you what he's done for our country, so I'll go on with this. He died then in 1626. He was persecuted and never fully recognized for his many talents. He ascended to the heart of God, which is the same goal for your life, on May 1st, 1684. He desired above all else to liberate God's people. He sought a dispensation from a cosmic council known as the Lords of Karma to return to earth in a physical body, which ascended masters never do. They granted it, and he appeared in Europe as the Count Saint Germain. He was called the Wonder Man of Europe. He looked a very young age, between 1710 and 1822. He was an outstanding alchemist, scholar, linguist, musician, artist, and diplomat. He was admired throughout the courts of Europe for his adeptship. He could remove the flaws in diamonds and other precious stones. He could bilocate, in other words, be at two places at once. He would dissolve his form at will. He would write the same verses of poetry simultaneously with both hands. I'll read to you from Saint Germain on Prophecy a few lines. He was, as Voltaire described him, the man who never dies and who knows everything. But that was incomplete. He was also the man who could play the violin like an orchestra. The man who spoke flawless French, English, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. Who was an expert in Latin, Greek, Chinese, Sanskrit, and Arabic. The man who was a poet, painter, artisan, scholar, statesman, and raconteur. He was no mythical figure spun out of salon gossip. Frederick the Great, Voltaire, Horace Walpole, and Casanova mentioned him in their letters. Newspapers of the day, the London Chronicle of June 1760, Le Notizie del Mondo, a Florentine newspaper in July of 1770, the Gazette of the Netherlands, all took note of him. Madame de Haussett, the lady-in-waiting to Madame de Pompadour, wrote of him at some length in her memoirs. She tells how in 1757 he undertook to remove a flaw from a medium-sized diamond for Louis XV. After weighing the diamond, she wrote, "His Majesty said to the Comte, the value of this diamond as it is and with the flaw in it is 6,000 livres. Without the flaw, it would be worth at least 10,000. Will you undertake to make me a gainer of 4,000 livres?" Saint Germain examined it very attentively and said, "It is possible, it may be done. I will bring it to you again in a month." At the time appointed, the Count Saint Germain brought back the diamond without a spot and gave it to the king. It was wrapped in a cloth of amianthos, which he took off. The king had it weighed immediately and found it very little diminished. His Majesty then sent it to his jeweler without telling him of anything that had passed. The jeweler gave him 9,600 livres for it. The king, however, sent for the diamond back again and said he would keep it as a curiosity. Unfortunately, with all of the wonder and love and wisdom and miracles he performed in the courts of Europe, Saint Germain was regarded as a curiosity instead of taken seriously. He understood the use of gemstones. One countess wrote that even though he dressed plainly, he wore diamonds on every finger, on his watch, on his shoe buckles, and the finest diamonds even adorned his snuff box. I would tell you then that the reason that I am wearing these rings on my fingers is because Saint Germain requires it for the blessing and the service that I may render you and that he may perform through me. I spoke to you about 7 chakras. You also have chakras of the 5 secret rays. They are in your hands, they are in your feet, the 4 points where Jesus was pierced by the nails, and at the point of the spleen where his side was pierced. Through those 5 secret rays, other kinds of energies from God are given. Your 5 fingers are each very sensitive distributors of this energy. If you are engaged in healing or helping others, or simply in your daily life, your hands are instruments of the grace of God to the world. So I do hold healing services in which I lay hands on people for healing. I'm not doing that during this stump, but that is one of the reasons I wear these, as well as for the release of certain cosmic energies and rays through the focuses, which as gemstones are used, they're used by the masters for the storing of light. Gemstones are molecular chalices, specially placed in the earth. Today, Chatham gemstones and emerald ruby and sapphire are made in the laboratory, but they are the same molecular structure. And the reason that we use them is because they help us hold a concentrated force field of energy, sometimes more powerful than what we could retain in our bodies. So Saint Germain, as the Wonder Man of Europe, worked behind the scenes. His goal was to bring about a United States of Europe, which is really a United States of Israel, because these were the reincarnated 10 tribes of Israel, the northern kingdom. And they were always the great brothers who were fighting amongst one another and never wanted to unite. He tried to forestall the bloodiest revolution yet and the reign of Robespierre, but he could not get the royal houses to listen to him. His counsel was ignored, the French Revolution ensued, and in a final attempt to unite Europe, he backed Napoleon, and Napoleon misused the power of Saint Germain to his own demise. Saint Germain turned to the New World. He had already been working with that New World as Christopher Columbus. He had already dreamed of it as Francis Bacon, and he was already there for the signing of the Declaration of Independence. He stood by George Washington throughout the Revolution during the winter at Valley Forge. He called for the signing of that document in Philadelphia, our Declaration of Independence, directed the writing of our Constitution. He anointed our first president, George Washington. He did not return to Europe. Towards the end of the 18th century, Franz Graffer wrote in his memoirs, Saint Germain said, "I shall disappear out of Europe and betake myself to the region of the Himalayas. I will rest, I must rest. Exactly in 85 years will people again set eyes on me. Farewell, I love you." This is exactly what he did at the end of the 18th century. He reappeared in the latter 19th century to assist the masters M. Moria, K.H. Kutumi, and Serapis Bey in the founding of the Theosophical Society. Saint Germain was in the Cave of Light, which is the name of the retreat of his teacher, the great divine director in India during that period. He retired from the world scene because he failed to gain the attention of people to follow the light and bring the light to the earth. Saint Germain said in May of this year, There are many factors playing upon the outcome of Earth. We have said that preparation is the key. The flame of hierarchy never leaves the one who chooses to be in constant communion with the light, at the same time understanding the need to secure one's physical presence and future. Beware, beloved, to navigate the tides of the dark cycles remaining in this century requires the sealing of one's being in the sacred fire. There has never been an hour in the history of Earth when it has been more important to keep the flame of the Ancient of Days within oneself and to take all necessary steps for the securing of that flame and its burning. The choice to make in this hour, beloved, must be a fervent choice to shun every part of death in self and society, to champion life and to determine to be in life continuously in the physical octave until the coming of that dawn. To this end you are called, to this destiny you have arrived. Let no man or woman or situation or personal karma or opposition or fantasy or nightmare take you from that to which you have been called and chosen by the Ancient of Days for hundreds of thousands of years. Saint Germain is speaking about your divine plan today, the divine plan of you and your twin flame. The teaching I bring you and the books is designed to help you discover that divine plan. We can call to Saint Germain's teacher, who is known as the Great Divine Director, and ask him to reawaken us and quicken us, each one individually, to what we are to accomplish today and tomorrow in these troubled times.